Hey folks, welcome to my channel or welcome back. My name is Kat. I'm a licensed registered dietitian nutritionist, and on this channel we like to talk about weight inclusive and weight neutral focused approaches to health, as well as diving into scammy and, in my opinion, unethical nutrition related businesses, products, mostly nutrition related MLMs, and other fear mongering nutrition related claims. Alright, so today you saw the title. We are doing a good old reaction video. Remember, these are my opinions. Please do your own information gathering before coming up with your own conclusions or before implementing anything for your health. If all that sounds good to you, let's go. So this first one, this one's actually from a former news reporter, not any news that I have seen, like from a different city. And so one of my friends had sent this over to me just kind of because of some of the claims that she is making in this video. To my knowledge, from what I was looking on her page, she's not in nutrition or an MLM company that I could find. I could be completely wrong about that though. But we still talk about nutrition related claims, health misinformation on this channel, and there were a lot of things in this video that I wanted to talk about and share my opinion about. So let's just dive in.
If you are trying to lose weight, if you have a current disease that you're battling or you're trying to heal or cure or get better from, or if you have ADD or ADHD kids, or even just kids you're really trying in this academic year to really shore up their focus, this video is for you. There's a common denominator really that all of us in this current society have to look at, and that is the issue of empty calories.
So before we get into the term of empty calories, I wanted to touch on that very first statement about the curing side of things and the common denominator being empty calories. Anytime I hear anything regarding like nutrition recommendations or anything, if it is tied along with curing, that is one little red flag that I see. Health problems, especially the chronic ones, often arise from combinations of genetics, environment, lifestyle, and at times dietary factors. It's an oversimplification to pinpoint everything onto empty calories as like the single culprit or reason why those chronic conditions might be going on. And while excessive consumption of foods that are not nutrient dense can lead to some issues down the line, some health issues like nutrient deficiencies, for example, and the associated outcomes of nutrient deficiencies, it's essential to get really an understanding of the overall complexity, the overall picture and context of overall environment, lifestyle, activity, diet, and other factors that come into play when we're talking about chronic conditions. So on this channel, I really like to encourage people to see health as more of like a holistic viewpoint. Holistic just meaning that it's not just physical. When we're talking about health, physical is not the only thing. Like, we need to take, in my opinion, a step back, look at a broader picture, a more whole picture, seeing that health is more than just physical health. It is that combination. Health is physical, mental, social, and I like to add emotional well-being as well. All of those different aspects play or are interconnected. We'll talk more about empty calories, but I want to get a little bit further in this video first.
What is an empty calorie? It's the chips, the sodas, the cakes, the cookies, the candies. Yes, even if it's gluten-free and lower sugar, if it doesn't have nutritional value, or if it has more sugar than nutritional value, that is an empty calorie. If you go to the grocery store today, I would say the vast majority of foods in there are empty calories.
So I really started to get a little bit frustrated. She was saying how the vast majority of food in a grocery store is empty calories. In my opinion, that is a horrible assessment of the vast majority of food in a grocery store. So an empty calorie is something that refers to a type of food that really has low nutritional benefits, meaning that it supplies energy or calories, but doesn't really supply nutrients like vitamins, minerals, fiber, and protein, along with other nutrients. Now, oftentimes these are going to be foods that are higher in calories, that have more added sugars in them. I'm not the biggest fan of that term. If you are not new to this channel, then you probably know that I really like to encourage people to have a food neutral kind of approach. So meaning we're seeing food as not good or bad, but really in the context. And so empty calorie, in my opinion, it might not be for you, but it kind of has this negative connotation to it. Now, if somebody, I use this example often, but if you, let's say you just woke up and you needed to run a half marathon that you forgot that you signed up for. I don't know how you would forget, but let's just go along with the story. So if I handed you an option, on one hand I had a handful of kale, and on the other hand I had cookies, Oreos, or whatever, like name any kind of empty calorie. What would happen if you were to choose that handful of kale? Like, and I'm not saying that that other option is going to be the best option, because with, you know, I'm a sports dietitian, and so what we would want to do, the ideal day, we would really want you to have a larger balanced meal a few hours before so that you would have time to digest that, but also get in some of those calories, those nutrients, the energy that'll help with that run. And then of course, closer to that run, we're going to plan for some additional snacks that are going to be a little bit easier to digest. And so I'm not saying that like this hand is going to be the best option, but out of those two, the handful of kale, one's probably not going to taste really good if it's just kale on its own, but even beyond that, it's probably going to give some gastric discomfort. It's not going to give you energy to do that run that you just woke up and forgot about. The calories, the empty calories, are going to provide, with her example, even those added sugars. You're gonna go for that run, it's gonna be more beneficial overall. So that is a way of like approaching food with the context, looking at the availability and choosing really with all of the information, right? You're not just like automatically going in with a kale good, empty calories bad kind of thing. It's looking at the context. Now, I will say that most of the time for a lot of people, you're not going to find yourself forgetting that you signed up for a half marathon, but the whole like idea of that analogy is really showing how we can approach food with neutrality and look at the context overall. And so kind of a side note of why I'm not the biggest fan of that term, empty calories, just because it takes the like nuance outside of making choices that are going to be most beneficial for you. It's going to take some of that power away from that person. I really like to have that person be empowered to make their own food choices based on context and the whole situation, and not just turn down something because it's on like a bad list. But I know that on the internet, nuance is not really celebrated. But really, going back to it, kind of went on a little tangent there, but going at empty calories, going off about one of my concerns about that is when it starts to displace nutrient-dense intake, nutrient-dense foods that are going to lead to some deficiencies down the line. So if it's causing, if you look at the big picture, if it's causing more harm than good overall within the context, then can we approach it a little bit differently, right? So I don't want somebody to see this and think that I'm like telling people to go add those empty calories into their intake. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we can approach it with a little bit more nuance, which again, it's the internet. So going back to what she has said, getting the empty calories out of the way, she was talking about the grocery store and the idea that the vast majority of food in there is empty calories. Now, while there certainly are those foods that she was talking about that she's, you know, not a fan of that are in the grocery stores, I really am not in agreement with the idea, the statement that the vast majority of food in a grocery store is empty calories. There are so many nutrient-dense foods available in grocery stores, you know this, and it's really going beyond that whole like that tip of eating the perimeter or eating around the perimeter. When inside of the aisles you can have very nutrient dense and very like helpful options, like beans and rice are in the aisles, avocado oil, olive oil is in there, olives, they're also in the aisles, quinoa, also canned fruits, canned vegetables, plant-based milks that are shelf stable, they're also in the aisles. There are so many nutrient dense foods in the aisles. Like if I have to shop the perimeter of a grocery store, I'm gonna miss a lot of the foods that are really the basis of a lot of my meals. Labeling the majority of a grocery store's foods as empty calories is an oversimplification. In a food neutral kind of way, it is crucial, in my opinion, to recognize that foods, they can provide energy and can serve a purpose. Even foods that you might consume that are considered like empty calories, they can play a role in satisfaction and enjoyment and culture. And so I see this kind of just like danger of labeling food. Creating this idea that there is the vast majority of foods are empty calories creates or reinforces this kind of fear or guilt around eating food from the grocery store. And it can lead to just unnecessary restriction and this like over focus on like clean foods. The context in which a food is consumed plays a crucial role in how we're looking at that food. What I like to do is really encourage people to have that empowerment over fear when they are approaching food so that they can have those foods that are nourishing and also satisfying. And it's also important to see the differences in value that foods can have, whether that is talking about from a nutrient standpoint or like a cultural or traditional kind of standpoint. There is more to food than just the nutrient value that it can bring to us. Let's continue.
So, what do you want to replace those empty calories with? Real food. Fruits, vegetables, meats, fish. If you can tolerate dairy, dairy. Those are the primary things you want to have be 90% of your diet. If you're someone who is healthy, then yeah, maybe you can tolerate 10% of kind of the other, the lattes or the mixed drink or the cocktail or whatever on the weekends. But if you're someone, in my opinion, who is out there actively dealing with something chronic and big, a big health condition, or someone who has a tremendous amount of weight to lose. I talked to a woman recently and she was telling me she had 150 pounds to lose. Her doctor had said she really had to get the 150 pounds off. She had lost 40 and then was struggling with the other 110. And that's not an easy task. It's just not. But if all of us, anyone who fits into those parameters, can look at the amount, at the volume of empty calories that you're consuming every day and either drastically do away with those or alter those or reduce those significantly, that is a way to flood your body with nutrients.
So in this part, she's really encouraging people to take away or take out those foods with the outcome of having more nutrient dense foods or flooding your body with nutrient dense foods. Now this is, and you might think that I'm like nitpicking here, but it's just a difference in view or difference in approach. So I really like to encourage people to include more foods, to really focus on what we can increase rather than what we can decrease, because what I have found and what is supported in like behavior change for nutrition related or health related behavior outcomes long term is more so of that focus around how can we increase the amount of nutrient dense foods and have that kind of crowd out some of those more foods that are maybe not so helpful. Because the whole focus is to reduce the diet cycling, right? Because what happens with diet cycling is weight cycling, and that has stress, that puts stress on the body. So we want to move away from that and look at what is more sustainable. And so you can nitpick again about like what the focus is on, but I wish that her message was more about what can we include and really focusing on that versus demonizing those added sugar or empty calorie foods. Again, this is not me saying go out and buy all of the added sugar and start incorporating that in your diet. No, if that is your takeaway, then maybe I'm not explaining it clearly or there is some like miscommunication. That is not what I'm saying. So I just want to make that very clear. And another thing that we can see in behavior change is when we really do focus on removing those kind of empty calories as she is really using in this video, that is when we can potentially see this kind of like pendulum swing of the more restriction that we have. When that restriction kind of lets up for any reason, we can see on the other side that the increase of overconsumption or like a binging kind of event can happen. The extent of the restriction can look different depending on the person and how long they're able to have that restriction, but that's a huge reason also why I really don't like to focus on taking those out so much as we can focus on adding nutrient dense foods in. The abrupt removal of those foods, if somebody is used to consuming those kinds of foods that she is talking about or referring to, sometimes because of the taste buds being so familiar with that, and also just like behavior change wise, like if somebody is used to the preparation or like the consumption of those foods, it's gonna take a lot more like energy, physical energy, but also like mental energy to make that like decision to choose those more nutrient dense foods instead. And what the outcome of that can be, and a lot of times, is cravings. So sometimes people will start a new intake plan, a new diet. They'll go on like a 30-day no sugar kind of challenge. And while they might have a reduction in cravings at the end, and I guess it just kind of depends on the person too, if they really like to put themselves through those 30 days of those maybe more intense cravings, and at the end of those 30 days maybe not feeling cravings so much. Of course, that could depend on the person. I have found, working with a lot of people over many years, is that if we can increase the amount of those nutrient dense foods, we can start to over time see taste buds start to change, and also taking care of any kind of reasons why cravings might come into play, because there are so many reasons why sugar cravings can pop up. But by approaching that and taking care of that, we don't really have to deal and go through that whole thing that someone might feel when they do like a cold turkey, no added sugar kind of challenge, which is not something that I would recommend because of behavior change and what we see evidence-based wise works long term for continuous nutrient dense food intake and staying away from diet cycling and weight cycling. And the immediate removal of some of those foods that she's referring to, they can be for reasons like economical reasons. It might be financially challenging to some to take that advice, and here's the thing too, most people know what is going to be more like nutrient dense foods versus not. Like, people know that vegetables are nutrient dense. Like, no one's out here really saying like Cheetos are the most nutrient dense thing, right? Like, people know. And so if somebody is primarily consuming foods that are maybe more highly processed, maybe more added sugars incorporated into them, maybe less fiber, less micronutrients, there might be a financial reason for that. And yes, working with someone like a nutrition coach or registered dietitian, that might help to give them ideas on how to maybe prepare foods that are more nutrient dense in a more economical way. That can be part of the picture. But just saying flat out like, stop eating these foods, start incorporating these traditionally, typically more pricey foods, like it takes the behavior reasons why that is going on in the first place out of the picture. It's just very, like, I understand the desire to have that kind of, like, to give that kind of advice, but it's really like we've moved on. Like, that's diet culture. It's not helpful anymore. And it doesn't provide the building of tools for individuals when they are in circumstances, when they encounter real world scenarios where there aren't those like nutrient dense foods always available. Like, it's not giving those tools of, okay, if you are in this situation, like, how do you approach that? And maybe this is just not her target audience, but for a lot of people, they encounter that daily, consistently, because for economical reasons or like geographical reasons. And so it's just not giving those tools. Let's continue.
Maybe the cereal in the morning or something like that. Yeah, we like the way it tastes. But again, if you're someone who is facing a bit of a health situation right now, you have to really take a step back and look at whether that could be holding you back. It's a big issue. It's a big driver of disease currently in our society.
Okay, so she mentioned cereals. That's why I wanted to pause for this point. So of course, not all breakfast cereals are like equivalent as far as the fiber amounts in them or the nutrient amounts in them or the added sugar amount in them. But there is a vast majority of cereals that are fortified with nutrients. Now, one of the reasons why they are fortified with nutrients, several different reasons, but just one of the biggest examples. So folate is something that is super important for people who are pregnant in early pregnancy. It allows the neural tube to close up fully, either like where the head is being developed or like the bottom of the spine, basically. So if there is a lack of folate, and you can have something like spinal bifida for like different reasons, but if there's not enough folic acid, a baby can be born with spinal bifida. And so the inclusion of folic acid reduced the amounts of spinal bifida that we were seeing a while back before fortification was started. I'm in America. I'm not super familiar with like the specifics of other countries, but for America, the fortification of grains, foods like cereals has been so important. There are so many children who really rely on those cereals as part of their breakfast program. The intake, the nutrients, the fortification has really been beneficial for children who have not come from food stable families. Those children who are facing food insecurity. And so it's just, because she mentioned cereals in particular, I wanted to really, and iron too, especially for children, like breakfast cereals are a big reason why children are not as anemic as they would be without the fortification of iron in breakfast cereal. So like breakfast cereals, while they can have a lot of added sugars, and certainly some of them have more than others, and there could be some other changes that could be made, you know, they're not perfect, but the fortification and just breakfast cereals in general, I think the benefits that we have gotten from breakfast cereals is so underrated, and I think breakfast cereals are unfairly demonized. Again, I'm not saying to go out if you're not consuming them already, but for what it's worth, like they are so valuable to so many Americans, so many children who come from food insecure homes. And I'm not a fan of the like demonization of cereals, especially with their long shelf life. They're easy, they're storage wise easy to store, and they're typically more economical compared to like the amounts of nutrients, the fortification, the micronutrients that are in there. Let's continue.
Rather than focusing on that, I just focus the 80% of the time that he's eating at my house with me, I can really focus on flooding his body, all my kids' bodies, with nutrient-dense foods, real food. That's the key, real food. I use the hashtag Real Food Revolution a lot.
Okay, so the real food revolution, that implies a shift of focus to minimally processed foods, which they can be very nutrient dense. When you pair together nutrient rich sources of carbohydrates, typically they're going to be full of fiber. That's going to be helpful for digestive health. We're going to get quality protein, a variety of the amino acids that are essential to our bodies. We're going to get fats that are anti-inflammatory, and we're going to get micronutrients from all of those different foods. All of those are great. But my concern is like what defines a real food? Like what is the line where it's not a real food and it's a fake food? Not everybody has access to what most people, like this person, would probably consider real foods due to socioeconomic reasons, location, or other barriers. And so like what can we do to make that real food revolution more inclusive and more realistic for a variety of people? And like when you look at that, that shifts the focus of like what the actual issues are when you're talking about places that maybe don't have access to nutrient dense foods as easily, or the cost is an issue, right? Like it takes that whole side of things out of the picture. In my opinion, the idea of like a real food revolution, my advice for it might be to focus more so on education around like maybe more economic friendly options, or like providing resources, a little bit more resources, rather than this kind of like strict and prescriptive advice. Let's continue on.
Notice that, because I think that's what we're really truly in the midst of. I think people are waking up to the fact that cookies, cakes, candies, these like lattes that we see everywhere. I mean, the list goes on and on, popcorns, all that. Yeah, if you have a little tiny bag of it once or twice a week, okay. But at the end of the day, that's not real food.
She just said popcorn is not real food.
You need nutrients, you need fruits, you need vegetables.
Yes, you need nutrients, you need fruits, you need vegetables, but popcorn is, going back to the definition of real food, what is that definition of real food? If it is something that's grown from the ground that only has one ingredient, then popcorn is a real food. Popcorn is a whole grain. It has fiber, it has antioxidants. It can be helpful for some people with like satiety, satisfaction, pretty versatile as far as like what you can put on top of it, but like popcorn itself, to say that popcorn is not a real food, it's literally grown from the ground. It has one ingredient. All right, so that wraps it up for that video. Just some of my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. Maybe I was being a little bit too harsh, but let's just continue on to the next reaction piece. All right, so this one is a Young Living picture. The text says, ditch the drugstore with Young Living's everyday oils. And it shows a variety of oils and their benefits, including cleaning and purifying, uplifts gloomy moods, boosts immunity, slows signs of aging, balances emotions, supports joint health, aids healthy circulation, and a whole lot more. Now this reminded me of like a Young Living graphic that might have been made like several years ago, but this was recently shared. Things like these are still being shared. Like these used to be more public several years ago before the FTC really started like sending out warning letters, and anti-MLM started talking more about some of these kind of health claims, but this is still going on. And it's important to emphasize that while essential oils may offer certain benefits, they should not replace medical advice or pharmaceuticals. I don't think I have to say that it can be potentially dangerous to replace prescribed medications or therapies with something like essential oils, especially without consulting your healthcare professional. So going back to the picture, the specific claims, the cleaning and purifying. Now some essential oils have been demonstrated to have like antimicrobial properties in lab settings, but their effectiveness as household cleaners compared to standard cleaning products is questionable. There's one that says uplifts gloomy moods, and while some people might find certain scents uplifting, essential oil should not be seen as a replacement for mental health professional care or treatment. There is another one that says boost immunity. Now there is limited scientific evidence to suggest that essential oils can boost immunity or have anything to do with the immune system, but I just want to like highlight that term boosting for a moment, because we don't want the immunity system to be boosted. Immunity system boosting can potentially like be more harmful than good. That's enhancing the immune response in something like an autoimmune condition or chronic inflammation. We want to support, we want to maintain a healthy immune system. We don't really like want to boost it. And the way that we can do that to support a healthy immune system is to get a variety of nutrient-rich foods in, get sleep, get enough water, get in some intentional movement. Stress management also plays a role. So yeah, there's a claim about it slowing down the signs of aging. There is no scientific proof that essential oils can reverse or slow the aging process. There's one that says supports joint health, which it might offer like temporary relief when like massaged into joints. Maybe that's what they're saying. I was trying to like be like, what do they mean by that? But it's not going to address the underlying joint issues if there's like joint issues going on. So just be aware of graphics like this with a whole bunch of claims saying that their products can just like replace everything in the pharmacy, basically. All right, and lastly, this is not MLM related, but it is something that I recently talked about on my channel. I actually did a video, a live stream reaction with another dietitian, Christy Wilson. She's a wonderful dietitian. I just wanted to briefly kind of summarize my thoughts on this piece. So the Washington Post put out an article. It was titled, "The Food Industry Pays Influencer Dietitians to Shape Your Eating Habits." Now I thought this was really interesting because they really focused in on just a small handful of registered dietitians who were partnering or having sponsored posts to share information regarding, for example, aspartame and the recent World Health Organization, their information regarding aspartame. Now, this article, it kind of painted a broad stroke over all dietitians as if to say that we are all working with the food industry to shape your eating habits when that is not the case. The majority of registered dietitians are working one-on-one with clients in like clinics or outpatient care. And this article specifically focused, or it seemed like they had a lot of concerns with aspartame in particular. Now, in this past summer, we're in 2023 while I'm recording this, getting towards the end, but this past summer, the World Health Organization provided information regarding aspartame. Now, when you actually go to the World Health Organization's information, their source, and read the statements that they put out, it really didn't change the recommendations for aspartame and what we would consider to be a consumption amount that would be a concern. So what happened was I'm reading from my notes, the Agency for Research on Cancer classified aspartame as possibly carcinogenic to humans on the basis of limited evidence for cancer in humans, limited evidence for cancer in experimental animals, or limited evidence related to the possible mechanisms for causing cancer. So the classification, what that means is that it was put in group 2B. Now, the strength of the classification being in group 2B is the third highest of 4 levels overall. And that is used when there is inadequate or not convincing evidence for cancer in humans or inadequate evidence for cancer in experimental animals. So like alcohol and tobacco is at the highest amounts, or group 1, saying that like we know this causes cancer, can cause cancer. And then like even the next group 2A, includes things like high temperature frying or night shift work. So you have night shift work as having more evidence of causing cancer than something like aspartame. Health professionals aren't lining up to say like start including aspartame containing foods, or saying that it's like this health kind of ingredient or product. What they are saying is that if it is something that you are consuming, if it is something that is providing you kind of joy, something that helps you to maybe do other things that support your health, then as long as you're staying within those recommendations per the World Health Organization and what they recommended, then there's not a concern to be had there. And so what these dietitians were doing is sharing that information, what the World Health Organization is saying about aspartame. And the problem that the article was talking about is the transparency, that they were being paid by American Beverage, which is a producer of some diet beverages that contains the aspartame. And so it's not that the dietitians were like taking the information out of context or sharing false information regarding the aspartame. The issue at hand was that some of them weren't as transparent. That piece wasn't the takeaway for a lot of people for the article. A lot of people focused and like clung onto the aspartame part, when in reality, if you really want to stay evidence-based, there is not that concern, as long as, again, I'm looking at my notes, the acceptable limit is 40 milligrams per kilogram body weight. Now, this does not mean that inherently, like anything above that means that someone is going to get cancer. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that there are other concerns that might come up at that point. Like a big concern would be an increased risk for micronutrient deficiencies and low fiber intake if like the intake of the aspartame was more than that. Because my question then is like, well, what else are you consuming? Are you able to, is it displacing those nutrient dense intake options, right? And so like when you're looking at that specific range, that comes out to 12 to 18 cans for someone who is 200 pounds. For someone who is 120 pounds, that comes out to 7 to 11 cans. And so if somebody is having that many throughout the day, my question is more about like, what else are you consuming wise? Like, are you getting enough micronutrients outside of that? Are you getting fiber? Are you getting protein? And so that article was a lot, in my opinion, the comprehension of what the World Health Organization actually said about aspartame. The comprehension was not there for the authors in that article. It was a clickbait kind of fear-mongering article, in my opinion. And interestingly enough, on the live stream, I actually found out from Christy that the main author of that article, he actually has a degree in psychology and he has written some nutrition books. So it's somebody who is not doesn't have a background in nutrition, kind of creating this nutrition content without the nutrition credentials. And so it seems like he does want to grow in the pathway of nutrition without those credentials. And so what better way, in my opinion, than to attack the actual nutrition experts in his desired profession. That's my opinion of that article. If you have not, I would encourage you, if you're interested in more of our thoughts, check out that live stream. If you do have specific questions about that article in particular, let me know. I will gladly do a more in-depth video on it if that is what you want. I don't think because I did the live stream that people will want like more content on it, but if you do, let me know. I will gladly do that because I do think that there was a lot of missed nuance and a lot of lack of comprehension of what the World Health Organization actually says about aspartame in there. The main issue was transparency in FTC guidelines regarding sponsored posts. But that was not the outcome. What a lot of people who read that article, that was not what they got from it. So those are my thoughts for this video. Let me know your thoughts on the topics that we discussed today. If you like this video, please leave a like and make sure you are subscribed. That wraps it up for this video. As always, remember, you can strive for health without subscribing to diet culture. I'll see you later. Bye.